I feel like most people, springtime hits and you go out and you buy your little potted tree, or you buy a bare root even, and then you come and put it in the ground and you watch it bloom and you watch the leaves come out. But what happens if you buy your tree in summertime, or if you're like me, you bought it in spring but just haven't put it in the ground yet? There's some different considerations for the summer and for the heat that you want to keep in mind as you're planting a fruit tree that are different than when you plant it in the springtime. I'm going to walk through those things so that way you have a successful planting. Let's get busy. I'm here with my cotton candy apium, it's interspecific hybrid, ready to go. Hey, before we go on any further, I'm curious, what kind of interspecific hybrid, like a pluot or a pluary or an apium, have you tried? What's your favorite? I'm curious to see what your favorite is so that way I can consider it for a future planting. Put that down in the comments below. So much flavor. The only thing worse than a non-planted tree is a dead tree. And at the end of this video, I'm going to share with you what you ought to do if you're not able to plant this in the ground directly. So stay tuned for that. Okay, the first thing you want to pay attention to when you're planting your fruit tree in the hot months, those summer months, is the tree's placement in relation to the trees around it. If you're doing a multi-planting like I've decided on this place right here for this flavor punch, what's going to happen is I want to make sure that it's getting adequate sunlight. These are all flushed out with growth. These are going to potentially shade this tree out. So what that might mean is if this is where I want this tree, I might need to cut some of this back if it's going to be shading it out. Let's say this tree was on the northern side of this planting, then I would want to cut some of this higher growth back to allow some of that sunlight to get in and to feed that tree. In this case, it's not going to matter as much because it really is going to be on the southwest side, which is going to get a ton of sun for, 6-7 hours of sun in this position. So that's the first thing to pay attention to. Let's talk about the next. A moment ago, I was talking about things shading it out, but you also may have some growth in the direction of the area that you want to plant. And so I want to plant that right here, and this growth on this flavor punch is going to get in the way. So I'm going to come through and cut off some of this. Now, I'm so reluctant to make these cuts, partly because there's a ton of fruit on here. Look at this. Look at this candy heart, just got wasted. The reality is that I want to put this tree right here where this limb is kind of impeding it. It's going to go right here. And so even though this limb is loaded with fruit, it's in this case got to come off. Now, this is your decision, because if you've got some time or this is close to being harvested, then you can maybe continue to water your plant in the pot. But for us, we're going to be gone for a little while and won't be able to consistently water that guy. It's got to get in the ground. So as much as it kills me, I'm trying to think of the long term. Look at all this fruit on here. It's not fully ripe, but there's some flavor there. Wouldn't you know it, right where I'm trying to dig and plant this tree is an old footing for an old fence post. I just realized that this is where the old fence line used to be. And so this concrete thing is just stuck in there. I'm gonna bring this out of the ground. You're gonna see what I'm dealing with. Ironically, this is gonna create the perfect hole in the perfect spot for this tree, so I'm not even gonna have to dig anymore. Yay! Like with all of my trees, I like to plant them high, slightly above grade, and then mound soil around it. It's not too root bound, which is really good. Just want to disturb the roots so that way they don't go in a swirling pattern but are facing out. And all these little feeder roots are now going to leave home and go look through the surrounding soil for nutrients and water. Because this has been in the pot for a while and has come out of dormancy, the roots are a lot more established. It's a lot more established root structure. So I'm going to have to break it up even a little more just to get those roots in their new home. Okay, now I'm going to orient this tree in the direction that I want it facing. I want ideally the graft to be not facing the south. I want it to be facing north so that way this doesn't get burned. And I'm also going to have these branches that I'm going to be training away from the middle of the tree facing out. So this looks like a good placement here. Time to backfill. Okay, let's get real for a second. It is difficult to cut off a branch that has a bunch of fruit on it. It is difficult to make these pruning cuts where you cut off more than half of your tree, but fruit trees or any kind of tree as opposed to vegetables and things like that are a many-year commitment. They're a many-year project, and so We're making a little bit of short-term loss so that we can experience long-term gains. Notice here, this space where we cut this, and lost 5 fruit, we're gonna have like 90 fruit just in the space where that one branch would have been. We lost 5 or 6 fruit. So it is painful to do that, but this is gonna set us up for literally decades of fruiting, and those are the kind of decisions you wanna make. Principled decisions. They're scary, but you can do it. Okay, we've got our tree backfilled. The second most important thing that you're gonna do for your tree in the heat like this is mulch. You cover up with mulch, and that is like putting a protective blanket on top of the root structure. As the sun comes, it beats down, it dries all of this soil up like this. Look how dusty and nasty that is. But if we were to pull over here, you'd see that the soil is moist. So the mulch is gonna help you to preserve moisture in the soil. It's gonna stabilize the temperatures, because this is gonna act as an insulating barrier. There've been times last year where it was 120 degrees or something crazy like that here. I came out in the orchard and I scraped away at the end of the day after that heat. I pulled away some mulch and there was some good moisture under the ground. And so this, you need a mulch. Mulch. And you're looking for a 3 to 4 inch layer of mulch all around the drip line of your tree, which in this case is really just this area right here for us. Okay, another crucial thing for your fruit trees as you're planting in the hot. Another crucial thing for you to do when you're planting your fruit trees in the hot summer heat is to cool yourself.
Say that many times that we've loved and we've shared love and made love.
Now that we've got it in the ground, there are 3 rapid fire things that you want to do to protect your tree. The first is you want to water it in, give it a long, slow soak with either a drip hose or whatever it is. You want all of that water to go down and force out all of the air bubbles and air pockets that are in that disturbed soil that we have below. And that's gonna allow those roots to make really good contact with the soil around them. Next thing, after you do that, is you want to, and I recommend doing this, decide to cut your canopy lower. In our case, we're not gonna be staking this up because I don't have this tall whip that's gonna be whipped around. So I'm gonna remove this stake to give me a better idea of what's going on with the canopy. And for me, I like making my cuts at about knee high. Now you're gonna freak out when you see this, but I'm gonna make my first cut probably right. I'm looking for outward facing little branches. There's a bud here, there's a bud here. So maybe I'll go here for now. What did I just do? Why did I just cut my tree in half? Less than in half, more than in half. Wasn't this a perfectly good tree? Absolutely is. However, backyard orchard culture style, which I have all of my trees, means that these branches are now going to turn into our scaffold. And so all of our fruiting is going to begin at knee high and go no higher than we can reach. And so it's important, if you're going to do that style, to take off the top part of your tree, because otherwise this is just going to shoot up toward the sky, and I don't want it in the sky. Another thing, especially if you're planting during the hot months like we are right now, is every one of these leaves, even though they're little factories for photosynthesis, they also have water requirements. And because we just stressed the tree and now just moved, we disturbed the roots and it's trying to reacclimate, we don't want it to have to support all of this canopy up here, providing it with enough moisture to do okay. So we just reduced the overhead of the tree. Those roots are now only having to feed this a little bit. So this was the right move. As scary as it is, it's so devastating to see, but so important. And the final thing you want to do is, the hottest months are the point where without a bunch of canopy on here, your tree can easily experience sunburn. And so you want to come through with something like Ivy Organics to whitewash your tree. I'll show you some examples of how we've done that on our other trees. And you want to whitewash the entire trunk and any lateral branches that are there. That's going to protect it from sunburn, as those rays are just so intense during these summer months. If you truly do not have the ability to plant this in the ground right now, over the summer, what I recommend doing is one of 2 things. If you're gonna go with the open vase type pruning, which is the backyard orchard culture, low canopy, I would make that pruning cut right now, so that way you're able to take advantage of the smaller canopy, because that little root structure down there can't support a giant canopy for long. The other thing that I would recommend, if you don't want to do that cut initially, is to use something like this 15-gallon container. And you see how much more volume there is than this 5-gallon? This 15-gallon is going to give you that much more soil, that much more moisture retention that's going to feed your tree what it needs through these hotter months. I appreciate you tuning in to this episode of The Busy Gardener. Hopefully this has given you some ideas on how to safely plant your tree in the summertime or in the heat. Hey, and whether you've got one thing to plant in your orchard or 500, till next time, stay busy.